From the heart of Big Ten country, Los Angeles, California, Ryan Abraham and David Woods present the Podcast of Champions.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Podcast of Champions. I'm David Woods from Bruin Report Online, the UCLA site on the 24/7 Sports Network.
And I'm Ryan Abraham from USCFootball.com, the USC site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And together we make the Podcast of Champions. Now talking all things Big Ten football, which is crazy. This is our second show of the Big Ten era, I guess. We're going to preview a couple of the Big Ten teams. We already did like the season previews for the incoming former Pac-12 teams, USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. And today we're going to talk Illinois and also Rutgers. If you have an email question you want to send to us, the new email address, Big Ten, all spelled out, cast@gmail.com. And as always, you can call or text us at 424-532-0678. And our new Twitter handle is at B1G Podcast. So please leave us a 5-star rating over on the Apple Podcasting app and all that stuff. Before, we just want to jump right into it, though, talking some Illinois football. Jeremy Werner from 24/7 Sports, covering the Illini. Follow him on Twitter or X at jwerner, WERNER 247. Jeremy, thanks for coming on. Our first Big Ten guest. So thanks for doing this, especially like a last-minute thing.
Well, no, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me. Welcome to your Midwestern / Eastern / Great Plains / West Coast home. Welcome in to the Big Ten. We enjoy that you guys are here because it certainly stabilizes things in the Big Ten compared to the rest of college football. I don't know if Illinois is the one you wanted to start it with a bang here with Illinois football. Illinois basketball, sure, is something we want to talk about. But thanks for having me, guys. You guys both do a great job. So I'm pumped to start this out.
Absolutely perfect school to start with.
Yeah.
It's the dominant I-State power. That's what we'll call it.
And two LA guys doing a Big Ten podcast. This is perfect, right? This is exactly what we need. The world needed this somehow.
I like it.
Yeah, the world's foremost experts. Well, I guess let's start kind of broad because we used to do this with a lot of the Pac-12 schools to kind of educate people about where they sit in the college football universe. And I'm curious about a lot of the like kind of non-Michigan, non-Ohio State that people are familiar with. But like when Illinois fans are talking about what's a good season, what's something that like you get excited about, that's kind of the like, okay, that's par for us. That's what we want to do. That's really good. And what are the high level expectations for the program?
Yeah, so just to take you back, like Illinois has a rich history of college football. This is the home of Red Grange. 100 years ago this year is when they opened Memorial Stadium, which was named after World War I veterans from the university. And they have 200 columns outside the stadium commemorating the almost 200 students that died in World War I. Red Grange opened that stadium with a 4-touchdown game that was historic for college football and just the sport of football in general in this country. And then Dick Butkus went to this university. I was talking with you guys before, like UCLA and Illinois played in the Rose Bowl in 1983. Illinois was a good program in the 1980s under Mike White because he brought a bunch of JUCO kids from California over to Illinois. David Williams is from California. He's the all-time leading receiver here at Illinois. So there's some West Coast ties there. And there's history. 1963 Rose Bowl game. 2007, Illinois played USC. They played. It wasn't really much of a game outside of Rashard Mendenhall and Regis Ben. I don't know if Illinois belonged on the same field as USC that day, but there is these blips of history here recently. Illinois won the Big Ten in 2001 and went to the Sugar Bowl. Lost to LSU, which was way better than them. 2007, they made the Rose Bowl. But it's just these blips in recent history. Since 1990, they've produced some good NFL players. Simeon Rice, Kevin Hardy, you get Devin Witherspoon in the league right now, Whitney Merciless, Corey Leggett. These are some solid football players, but they've just never put this program together just because they really haven't gotten the right leadership. They haven't invested to that point. I think they're starting to do that now. But a good season for Illinois, guys, is a bowl game. That's where Illinois is because they have been at the bottom of the Big Ten for most of the last 2.5 decades, going on 3 decades here. There is some success. They made back-to-back bowl games under Ron Zook in 2010 and 2011. But after that Rose Bowl, They went 5-7 the year after, when everyone thought they could be an 8 or 9 win team. And then the next year they went 3-9, despite having a ton of NFL draft picks on it. So that's why Ron Zook ended up getting fired after 2 straight bowl games and 2 straight bowl wins because of that. They wanted more. And then they just made the worst hire this program's ever made in Tim Beckman. It was an absolute disaster. They got Lovie Smith in here after an abuse scandal to try and clean things up. And he brought them credibility, guys. He brought them credibility with the donors. That helps them get the $80 million football facility they have today. But he just didn't win. He was stubborn, didn't really adapt to what the college game was, recruiting-wise. Never got a quarterback here that really moved the needle. So they've hired Bret Bielema. And Bret Bielema knows how to coach. He is credible. He knows what he's doing. And he's brought competitive football to Illinois. The problem is, guys, they've just missed on this great opportunity. They missed a bowl game by 1 year in his first season, which would have been unbelievable. The next year, they start 7-1. And it's like, oh my gosh, they could get to a New Year's 6 game with this unbelievable defense. Ryan Walters is defense coordinator, 4 top 100 draft picks, or 3 top 70 draft picks in the secondary. But they go 1-4 down the stretch. So they just missed this opportunity to go to Big Ten championship game, potentially propel their program. And then last year, they kind of laid an egg early on, go 2-4. They get to 5-4 with 2 games left, and then they lose the last 2 games. So they are within a win or 2 or 3, really, of the best 3-year stretch in Illinois history. But so many of these Illinois things are what if. So I know that's a lot, but that's kind of the history of where it is, where Bret Bielema's had one of the best 3-year stretches, but there's also missed opportunity here. So that's why going into this season, it's a big year.
Love it. Everyone to check out. This is a professional, man. Look at this. Look at this background he's got. If you're watching on YouTube live, looking great. He's done this before. You know, he does a lot of radio, a lot of video stuff.
Have to.
Got it all. Appreciate it. So,
how old are your kids, or one kid? What do you
75.
got? Nice.
I'm right in the middle of the Bluey thing, and my wife and I love it more than they actually do.
It's heartwarming. Ryan, you'd love it.
I will have to check it out. Yeah. Great stuff, though. Appreciate all of this. And I let everyone know, too, we are doing this live on YouTube, as we've been doing. I know it's kind of a last-minute thing. We did it right now. So check it out. Or you can watch the replay on YouTube. And, of course, anywhere you get your podcasts, you can get the podcast of Champions. Same name, a little bit different feel now. Talk about the last 3 years, Jeremy, and the stretch. Bret Bielema, just missing, just could have been there. There's great opportunities when you're in the Big Ten West. That is now gone. I think Illinois was picked to finish in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten West. That's where they finished, 3-6. I think the whole bunch of people were 3-6 in the Big Ten West. Divisions are gone. More games against some of the opponents from the East now. What does this mean for Illinois football? I mean, you add some big programs coming in too, but also the schedule mix up. There were some opportunities there, I think, if you were in the Big Ten West that maybe aren't going to be there anymore.
Yeah, which is why the last couple of years hurt. The good thing for Illinois, guys, is they do have 2 protected rivalries against Big Ten West teams, and that being Northwestern and Purdue. Now, Illinois historically has struggled against those teams. They've really struggled against Purdue here recently. They did turn the tide a little bit on Northwestern, but they get those 2 teams every year. So it's a little bit better, I think, than what Minnesota's got a bunch of rivalries, but they got a little bit of a built-in Big Ten West there, having those 2 teams. And they have struggled against Wisconsin and Iowa for a really long time. But yeah, now the guardrails are off. Now you can't avoid Michigan and Ohio State for 4 out of 5 years, right? You're going to get them 2 or 3 times. You're going to get Oregon. This year, the Illinois schedule, you guys just showed it up on that screen. They did not get any breaks. They're going to Penn State, they host Michigan, and they're at Oregon all before November. That's probably 3 losses, right? So that's where it hurts, and that's where they got to make up for when they do get the opportunities of playing Rutgers, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State when they're struggling. Minnesota, Bret Bielema's never lost to. You have to take advantage of those games, and that's why Illinois needs to continue to rise up in the Big Ten to where they can be that middle tier program. And you guys asked me before, I didn't answer, like, what is the hope? The hope is to be Iowa or Wisconsin eventually someday. I think they're getting to the level where Minnesota is, where they're in bowl contention every year. And that's a huge step for Illinois. But now they have to stay there in a conference that is adding 3 teams at least that are better than it. UCLA and Illinois kind of have this similar history
Yeah.
of, hey, we're a basketball school. We should be good in football, but can we figure this out? Can we hire the right people? So I think Illinois and UCLA can be on the same realm. Just depends on what year you're talking about. Those three other programs are better than them. Oregon, definitely. USC, definitely. Washington, Illinois played a series against them, and it was terrible about a decade ago. So that's where it gets harder, is you have to continue to rise your game over Northwestern, over these other bottom tier or bottom half Big Ten teams. So they got to take advantage of that. And there's so many toss-up games on the schedule this year. They need to win more of those than they have. Bret Bielema's been so competitive, guys. 17 one-score games over the last 3 years. They've won 7 of them. Think about it. If you change 3 of those, it's a different thing we're talking about. We're talking about Illinois as one of the big risers. Right now, we're just kind of talking about them as, oh, yeah, they can be scrappy. They want to be better than that.
So looking at the last couple of years, because I'm curious, because you mentioned Ryan Walters moving on, obviously, and that defense, I think in Bill Connolly's SP+, they were number 2 in 2022. Offense was bad, but the defense was elite. And then last year, offense incremental improvement. Defense, though, took a big step back. How much of that do you attribute to the loss of Walters, and how much is it just the vagaries of the oscillation of talent? You lose some guys and things change. And then projecting forward, what are you thinking about this season in terms of the relative strength of those two sides of the ball?
I hate taking the easy way out, but it's both. It's both of those things. I mean, they lost Devin Witherspoon, who's the number 5 pick in the draft, was a Pro Bowler, was a no-star recruit when Illinois got him, and they developed him into this unbelievable player. So kudos to Lovie Smith and his staff for finding him, but Bret Bielema and his staff for developing. Sidney Brown was a 3rd-round pick and starting game for the Eagles late last season. Quan Martin was a 2nd-round pick, nickel, and now was starting games for the Washington Commanders late in the season. Kirby Joseph had left 2 years ago and is now a starter for the Detroit Lions and a big playmaker back there. So they did lose talent, and I think they were a little too overconfident in themselves that they could develop the talent in the secondary that they had, and they should have been more aggressive in the transfer portal. So I think they made that mistake because their secondary was torn up last year. And they had Johnny Newton, who was the Big Ten defensive lineman and Big Ten defensive player of the year last year in a conference that included Michigan, in a conference that included Penn State. He was the best defender, and getting to watch him every day, he was deserving of that award. Like he belonged at one of those top tier schools and could just wreck games, but they didn't take advantage of it. And part of that is Bret Bielema made a risk when he hired Aaron Henry. Ryan Walters is one of the best coordinators I've ever seen in Illinois. He's the first Illinois coordinator to get a head coaching job since Mike Loxley back in 2008, I think, 2009. So it's been a long time since Illinois had a guy get promoted like that. He's a really good defensive coach. We'll see what he does as a head coach of a Big Ten program at Purdue. But Aaron Henry had never been a defense coordinator before. And he was just betting that Aaron Henry, who's really outgoing, he's got an incredible ability to communicate, and he's really inspiring. But he'd never been in that job before. So learning on the fly, it showed itself last year. Like Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas, now the Penn State offensive coordinator, really tore him up against Kansas. And Illinois just did not have the secondary to be as aggressive as Ryan Walters was. Like Illinois, what they like to do is play man-to-man and get after you with their blitz packages. I love that because why wouldn't you put college quarterbacks under duress? Most of them can't handle it. But last year they had to sit more in zone or they didn't blitz as much, and that just gave quarterbacks so much time to kind of pick them apart. And it didn't allow enough time for Johnny Newton and some of the defenders to get one-on-one matchups and take advantage of that. Plus they had injuries. Running back, they had 5 guys get hurt, 4 guys with season-ending injuries. Their offensive line wasn't very deep, and their right tackle struggled early on. So it was just a lot of issues early in the season, but they were better late in the season. But their defense really struggled. Their secondary really struggled, but they went to address that this past offseason. They got Terrence Brooks, a former 4-star prospect, started about 16, 18 games at Texas. They think he can be their next draft pick in the secondary. Added Torrey Cox Jr., a 2-year starter at Ohio. So they finally addressed that position, knowing that, hey, we can't make the same mistake we did last year. Maybe being a little too overconfident in our ability to develop. We can't let freshmen be thrown out there late in the season like they were last year.
Going into Big Ten Media Days next week. I think last week I talked about it was like this week, but it's actually next week. SEC Media Days started today. Actually, the college football video game was released like a little bit before we went live, so maybe we don't.
Yeah, we're breaking a lot of people away from that, or they're deciding not to watch because of that.
Yeah.
But either way, we're sorry.
Yeah, we're just, it's just the timing and stuff worked out there. But what are you kind of looking for to learn from the Illinois side of things at Big Ten Media Day in Indianapolis? I know, returning starting quarterback Luke Altmaier is not going to be represented there. That's usually a question when a returning quarterback isn't at Media Day. But what are you kind of your takeaway of that and what you want to try to learn about the Illini at Media Days?
Yeah, one thing I want to throw out there, Bret Bielema, I did research on this, guys. I'm sick. In 16 years as a media days, he's been a head coach for 16 years, and he's done it 16 media days. He's taken a quarterback 4 times, and they've always been seniors. Luke is a junior. So Bret's a defensive lineman. He loves offensive linemen. So he's always going to try and get the guys that he wants to pub. Like he had Tommy DeVito, and now almost everybody in the country knows who Tommy DeVito is after what he did with the Giants last year.
Yeah.
One of the biggest personalities ever. He didn't take him. He took Quan Martin, who no one really knew about at that time outside of Illinois circles. So he doesn't really care about those storylines or who we want. He wants to put some of these other pieces out there, but their offense should be pretty good. Barry Loney Jr., who came from UTSA a couple of years ago. Luke Altmaier was a good quarterback for most of last year. He had a weird year, guys. He threw 7 interceptions in his first 3 starts, including 4 against Penn State. He was getting pounded in that game. I think PFF had 23 pressures against Luke Altmaier and like 30 dropbacks, which is just insane and tells you about where the offensive line was early in the year last year. But after that game, he threw 10 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, was the best running guy as a pocket passer in the Big Ten, and he was really accurate, and he's got a good arm. The thing he needs to do a little bit better is get rid of the ball. And I just think that's growing pains of a first-year starter. This is a former 4-star prospect who looks like a 4-star prospect. Illinois has had a terrible quarterback history over the last 10 years, but it's starting to turn with Tommy DeVito, with Luke Altmaier. And then last year, guys, he got benched for the final 3 games because he had a concussion. And then John Paddock had one of the biggest all-time heaters. He came in relief against Minnesota, threw 3 complete passes for 80-something yards and a touchdown to lead Illinois to a comeback win. Then against Indiana, threw 510 yards and 4 touchdowns to lead him to an overtime game. You can't bench that guy. So Luke really didn't lose the job. He shouldn't have lost the job. But Paddock started the last 3 games. They only won 1 of those, by the way. But he's a good quarterback. They have Pat Bryant returning as a starter. Added Zachary Franklin, who is a star at UTSA. And they've added 4 transfer offensive linemen because depth was an issue last year. They were adamant about that not being an issue. And J.C. Davis, who they got out of New Mexico, a lot of people thought Oklahoma or some of the Pac-12, former Pac-12 schools that are in the Big Ten now could have gone after him. They think they got a real steal with him. So I'm just interested to hear why Bret Bielema thinks, after losing 11 draft picks over the last 3 years, guys, which is 4th in the Big Ten, during that time, tied for 4th. It's only behind Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State. Like they have developed talent, but now that talent's gone out the door. So these are all his recruits now. This is his roster that he has built. They have taken a step to competitiveness. How confident is he that they can take another step in this new Big Ten? That is the overwhelming question for Illinois because, guys, it's expanded Big Ten. It's fun if you're in the Big Ten. You're making a lot of money. But I have this vision that if I'm Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Rutgers, Maryland, what's going to happen in 10 years? Yeah. Is it going to contract more, right? And for Illinois, that means you better get good at football. So I think these next 5 years, and I think Bielema is going to be here for a while, but these next 5 years are really important to establish yourself as a brand in a great market, close to Chicago, close to Indianapolis, close to St. Louis. It's really important to establish your brand that, hey, year in and year out, they're going to be competitive in the Big Ten, and we're going to draw eyeballs on TV. Otherwise, I wouldn't feel safe because I would just feel like these other schools they can pick apart from the ACC, bring them in, and Fox is going to want USC against Clemson, or Fox is going to want Ohio State against this Texas school. Like that's what I would be nervous about long-term for Illinois. So just continuing to take that step forward to where you can be more of an Iowa brand. You can be more of a Wisconsin brand. That's going to be really important over the next several years, in my opinion.
All right. I think we'll get you out of here on this question because we know you got to go. So Illinois' schedule, we talked about it a little bit up top with the danger zone, which is Michigan, Oregon, Penn State. And then you've got, I would say, a couple of obvious wins in the non-conference in Eastern Illinois and Central Michigan, though directional Michigan can always be weird. Who knows? The rest of the schedule. So when I was looking at the over-unders, Illinois was set, I think, for most of these at about 5.5. With where that is, and with the kind of goal of getting back to a bowl game after missing one last year, where are the danger spots in the schedule? Where are the must wins? Where's the stuff where they've got to rack up numbers?
Yeah, I think the key is Eastern Illinois, Central Michigan, you got to win, right? Obviously. But I think that week 2 game against Kansas is such a kind of definer early in the season because Kansas is really good. Jalen Daniels is really good. Devin Neal, their running back, is really good. But they lost Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator, is now the offensive coordinator at Penn State. I think he's awesome. I think he is great. I think he really outschooled Illinois and Aaron Henry in that first game. But I do feel like Illinois has a chance there being at home. And if they could win that certainly changes how you feel about the season. But going to Nebraska has not been a good program in the Big Ten over the last decade that they've been in here, but especially ever since they hired Scott Frost. But Matt Rule is a good coach. He's making them stronger on defense and in the trenches, which is where they really struggled under Scott Frost. That's a huge game on a Friday night. If you lose that one, all of a sudden you're looking at Penn State, home against Purdue. You got to beat Purdue at some point. You got to win that game. But then you got home against Michigan, at Oregon. You could, if you stumble against Kansas, Nebraska, and Purdue, you could be looking at a disaster of a season. But if you win those games, you look at that last stretch of 4 games. There's no reason Illinois can't win all of those. I don't know if they will, but you can look at that stretch of schedule and say, we can win 3 of those games with home against Minnesota, home against a struggling Michigan State program. I know Rutgers is getting better under Schiano. That's still a game you can win. And then at Northwestern, it's a rivalry game. I always feel like it's going to come down to a bowl or bust in that game. But that's why the Kansas, Nebraska, Purdue games to me are so important, because if you lose those, you could have a long losing streak, given you got some of the powerhouses in the Big Ten there.
All right. Jeremy Werner doing a great job covering the Illini. IlliniInquirer.com over on the 24/7 Sports Network. Looking forward to talking with you in the future for the, I don't know how many years the Big Ten is like it is like now. Who knows? I don't know what's going on. But it's a really good point of like, hey, if you're like at the bottom part of the Big Ten, you better get better because you could get, clipped off at the knees.
You don't want to be Oregon State and Washington State. That is, you do not want to be those programs. So I think Illinois is in a good situation compared to some other Big Ten programs because of their alumni base, because of where they are, the state. It's the 6th most populated state. The basketball program is really good, but just don't be terrible to where it's easy to chop you off. And if I'm any of those bottom half Big Ten teams, this is a really important decade ahead to establish that, in my opinion.
All right. Well, Jeremy, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I've got to give some applause. Very professional. I'm going to go on his show, talking some USC this Thursday. I think we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So check it out. Yeah. Where's your show at? I would let people know.
It's just a Illini Inquirer podcast. You can follow us wherever you get us, YouTube, all of that. But we appreciate it, Ryan. Looking forward to learning. I know people know about USC because it's got a big national brand, but getting your guys' take about coming into the Big Ten here.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much. And we'll hopefully talk to you real soon. Everyone else, hey, let's take a quick break. And we're going to come back with Brian Dohn talking all things Rutgers football, some Scarlet Knights. Back in a minute, everyone. All right, David, I'm going to set up the Dohn shot. So maybe get your thoughts. I'm doing this live because we have to do this. But yeah, what are your thoughts on what we learned about the Illini?
Well, the reason I ask those historical perspective questions at the beginning is because I mean, frankly, we don't have the institutional knowledge of a lot of these schools like we do in the Pac-12, and even in the Pac-12, we had to ask those kinds of questions. So kind of just a table setter. And it was interesting to hear about, Illinois' rich history. And it makes sense. I mean, as he said, sixth most populous state, Illinois should be better. Like, they should be more consistently better. Sixth most populous state, and as the NCAA football game will tell you, very high academic prestige. I think they're listed as the sixth or seventh best, highest rated academic program in the country.
Wow. Okay.
In the NCAA football game. So there's stuff to sell at Illinois. I think more than, it kind of gets lumped in because of the recent history with Indiana, with Rutgers, and Rutgers, obviously, as we'll talk about, is on the upswing again, thanks to Greg the Man Schiano. But all these things, they're, they probably shouldn't be down in the basement. So maybe Bielema gets it together here.
All right. Well, let's bring in Brian Dohn. I think it worked. Look at that. I am like producing, hosting, doing all this crap all at once. Good stuff. You can follow him on X, Brian Dohn, DOHN 247.
Twitter.
Or Twitter, whatever. Thanks for coming on, Brian. That was great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I hope you guys are doing well. And listen, I caught the tail end of Jeremy, so I didn't hear all of it. But if we are talking relegation battles, being the soccer guy that I am all for it. Let's go. Relegation battles. You want to make college football exciting down the stretch for teams that aren't involved in national title races? Let's go. Relegation.
Yeah, okay, so first on that kind of subject, but also with Rutgers, this is the thing that, honestly, when I was thinking about the move to the Big Ten for UCLA, I was anti the idea because, look, you're very familiar with UCLA's recent history, but they haven't been good in a long, long time, and they're going to be going into a league where they've got to play, 3,000 miles from home on the regular. It's not going to help things competitively. And, for like the fan out there, wouldn't you rather see your team win than, I don't know, see that their budget is better? And so I wonder if it's similar for Rutgers or if it's just the necessities of modern college football that you got to be in the Big Ten.
Well, listen, UCLA, the reason Rutgers is in the Big Ten, let's just get straight down to it. The reason Rutgers is in the Big Ten is because Maryland's athletic department was in abysmal financial shape, and Maryland needed a big money deal so their athletics could be successful. Now, in order to bring in Maryland, you had to bring in somebody else. Who makes sense? Well, Rutgers, because at the time, the Big Ten, public research institution, land-grant university, all the things, AAU member, which at the time was wildly important. But what was the most important thing? Television market. It's media market. And I heard Jeremy talk about, well, Illinois is safe. Listen, you're safe if you have a really good media market. If you do not have a really good media market, then there's reason for concern. And so how does this factor in with UCLA? Well, UCLA needs money. And there's two conferences out there that have a lot more money than everybody else, Big Ten and the SEC. And I don't think it was a fit for UCLA in a number of ways for the SEC. And for the Big Ten, you now have, look what they did. The Big Ten went and got the two Los Angeles schools. Having lived there for 12 or 13 years, I understand the dynamics of all of that. You went and got Oregon, which is a national brand. So even though Eugene may not be a huge market, or Portland, you have a national brand. And you went to Seattle and got Washington, which is another really big media market where UW, other than the Seahawks and, of course the Sounders will say, but, the UW is a big deal there. And so it's a media market. And so for UCLA, this was the only way UCLA had a chance to get healthy, was to join the Big Ten. And USC, and Ryan, you would be much more versed on this, when you're looking at the long game of it, USC had to get in there because the Pac-12, I live in New Jersey now. I used to love watching Pac-12 games, and I can't tell you the last time. I don't even know where I would have been able to find the Pac-12 network, but I know I didn't have it here, and nobody around here did. And so it's all about money. It's only about money, and it's because, to make a long story short, It's because athletic directors can't control salaries, don't understand how to raise the kind of money needed to run businesses like this. And so you need the TV revenue to do it.
Way too much soccer talk already, Brian. I don't know what we're doing here. I guess
Is that possible? Is that possible?
We just had like the Copa. I watch a bunch of those things. Every time I watch it, 0-0. I'm like, oh, come on. The last one was good. The Argentina Colombia one. I watched that one. That was pretty good.
That was wild. Yeah, the big games are usually tough because nobody wants to make a mistake. So, it's basically, think of in football terms, nobody wants to throw the ball down the field against a really good secondary, and they're willing to play field position. Yeah. That's what a lot of these championship games turn into.
The only people who want to make mistakes are the people who are letting people into the stadium. They apparently want to make a lot of mistakes.
That was pretty bad. So we were just talking Illinois. You got Bret Bielema, who was, part of Big Ten footprint for a while and, sort of resurfacing at Illinois. Now, for Rutgers, Greg Schiano's back, for a second term. We've seen that at USC with John Robinson coming back, but this seems to be doing much better than what, J-Rob 2 did at USC. And it seemed like since Schiano left, not a whole lot of success. He comes back and you start to kind of build on it again, making a bowl game last year and stuff. What's kind of been the secret there? What's it been like with Schiano back running the show at Rutgers?
Yeah, I think when he left the first time, he left to go to Tampa Bay for the NFL, and it felt, Kyle Flood was the coach who was now the O-line coach at Texas, and let's just say it didn't go well when 6 members of your secondary are getting arrested, weeks before the season. And then on top of that, they hire Chris Ash, who's a great guy. Really enjoyed speaking with him. But, New Jersey's different. And he never had a chance for the infrastructure, for a lot of reasons, for not putting money in. And so Schiano comes back, and it's really easy to sit there and say, okay, they went to a bowl game last year. They beat Miami. They finished 7-6. First, I think, winning record since 15. And it's easy to sit there and go, it's simple because Schiano's back and he knows what he's doing. And while that is true, his coordinators are making $1 million plus. He has huge support staff. From an institutional standpoint, he usually gets what he asks for in terms of – now, look, he doesn't have the new football building because, anyway, AD can't raise money, but that's something else. But for what he needs for on-the-field stuff, he's getting everything he needs. He's paying the coaches like they should be paid in the Big Ten, and he knows what he's doing. He understands what the recipe is, and I don't remember John Robinson's path after USC and back, but Schiano turned around, and after he was fired by Tampa Bay, went and was Urban Meyer's defensive coordinator for 2 years. And so he understood at Ohio State what kind of players you wanted, how Urban recruited when, look, if you're going to take a kid that's under the radar, make sure he has at least one elite trait, stuff like that. And I think it's really easy to forget that the guy knows how to coach and he knows how to develop players. And, I was living in LA when they had their season, I think it was 05, 06, whatever it was, where they played Louisville on a Thursday night and everybody kind of, figured out what Rutgers was at that point or could be. And what people forget is when you look at that game, of the 22 starters in the game, I think 20 of them went on to play in the NFL. And so it takes time. Yeah, it takes time to develop. They're not going out and getting the 5 stars even before NIL. And now with NIL, they're certainly not going out and getting them. But I've always said there's enough good players across the country for any program to be successful. But are you willing to put in the work? Can you find them? And more importantly, can you develop them? We talk about, did somebody outperform their ranking or underperform their ranking? We always talk about different aspects of it, but we never talk about, was the coach good or bad? Mm-hmm. And sometimes a bad coach can make all the difference, just like a good coach can make all the difference.
So with Schiano, looking at his trajectory right now, it's following a very similar path to what he did originally. And as you pointed out, a lot of it's funding and a lot of it's being able to work the kind of innards of the university to get what he wants. But it's doing it. So when you go back and look at what Rutgers was doing back his first time around, they had some really good offenses. They had Ray Rice, but they had bunch of guys. And, there were a couple years where they were a top 20 offense. This time around, it's much more heavily towards the defensive side of the ball. What's it going to take for him to improve the offense necessary to kind of get over that next hump?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. Get a competent quarterback who can throw the ball and can, in the college game, stress a defense with his feet and his arm. And, it takes a while to build an offensive line. And I think it's coming along, but I think those are the two things that I look at and say, so you look at the quarterback last year, right? And I hate reading some stuff, but I don't want to get it wrong. So I'm just going to point it out to you. So last year, their quarterback, Gavin Wimsatt, who is now transferred to Kentucky, completed 48% of his passes through 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 1,300 yards throwing the ball. They were the 120th total offense, 94th scoring offense, 124th in passing yards. And keep in mind, I think that's 130 teams, and we have the academies who run option. So, you know where it is. So they go out, they get I think Kirk Shiraka, the OC from last year, they brought him in from Minnesota. He did a great job of, David, you brought up Ray Rice. And the one thing about Ray Rice was give him the ball 600 times a game. And
right
at the end of it, you'll wear him down. You wear the
different era. Yeah, for sure.
You'll control it. And Kyle Monangai is not Ray Rice. And that's not a slight on Kyle. It's just that Rice was one of those, he's going to go down as one of the best players in Rutgers history. But Monangai led the Big Ten in rushing last year. And they were quite content with 3 yards here. They were quite content to be 3rd and 3 consistently. And they don't want to. I mean, I can sit there, I remember watching a couple games last year as you're flicking through games on Saturdays where you got guys running across the middle wide open and the ball sails over their head. You don't need him to be, Caleb Williams or Troy Aikman back there, but you need somebody that can at least impress something on the defense to where, hey, we have to worry. I remember watching a Maryland game. It's like 4th and 1.5 yards. And Maryland just crowded the box. Like they're like, it's 4th and 1.5 yards on the right hash. They're going to run it because they don't trust this quarterback to throw it. And of course they ran it. They stopped Rutgers. And that was the moment for me where I was like, oof, this team better figure out something at quarterback. And so they bring in Ethan Kaliamakis, who was at Minnesota, who played for the Rutgers offensive coordinator at Minnesota. Now, was he throwing for 3,000 yards last year? No, but he completed 53% of his passes, 14 touchdowns, 1,800 yards. He's not the running threat that Wimsatt was, but he's a much better passer. And, if you give me a choice in college football of a guy who has some mobility and can get the ball down the field versus a guy who has a lot of mobility and can't get the ball down the field, I'm going with the guy who can at least make your secondary pay attention in film study during the week. And I don't know if they really had that last year. So, I guess sometimes I get long-winded, but I guess the short answer is they just need better quarterback play and the offensive line to continue to grow.
Brian, does Rutgers exist in this new college football landscape? It depends on, it's not just, the staff is great at recruiting. You have to do retention. NIL is a big part of it. How are the boosters? Like, where does kind of Rutgers fall into this new world where it takes money to retain and obtain new talent, or the same thing?
They sit remarkably better than probably everyone out there thinks. And it's because, I remember talking to somebody on a Thursday night during the season, and they said, I got to go. Schiano's coming to meet with some boosters. This is like a Thursday night during the season. And he was going there, for NIL. And so when you look at their season last year, like I said, 7-6, huge upward swing for them. The only player they lost that they wanted to retain was Renee Conga, who wound up going to Louisville. And Conga was a backup defensive lineman. And, they need him this year. He's a 20 snap a game guy, but they did a remarkable job of retaining players. So, we talk about Kyle Monangai already. They retained him. In the secondary, man, they got some really good players. Flip Dixon, who's a safety, who's really good. They went and got one of the top, like 1AA, FCS, whatever you want to call it, Demir Miller, a receiver from Monmouth who they think has a chance to be the #1 receiver. They pick their spots. They understand who they are. I don't think they're going to be out there throwing around a lot of money to players in high school. But if you're proven, I mean, they get Malcolm Ray. They know who they want. Malcolm Ray, a defensive tackle from Florida State. He's got a chance. He's probably going to start at Rutgers. He would probably be a backup at Florida State. So, and then you turn around and you look and say Florida State was an undefeated team last year. So no shame in not being a regular there. They have a couple guys that are, Tareem Powell, who had a torn Achilles, but he should be ready at least for, by the time the real part of the season starts for them, he should be ready. I mean, you're talking about a kid who, if he didn't get hurt last year with his hand, scouts were talking about a second-round draft pick. They got another cornerback in Robert Longerbeam, who was talking about being a mid-round pick. They have two defensive ends who will probably get drafted in Wesley Bailey and Aaron Lewis. They probably have 5 or 6 guys on this defense who have a chance to get drafted. And that's without guys really starting to show off on, with some big senior seasons or last season. So they do have a lot of talent. He does, Schiano does a great job of pushing out the noise, communicating with the kids and understanding that, hey, this other school, maybe they can give you a little bit more in NIL, but here's the plan we have for you. And this is where you're going to get drafted. And because he has that NFL experience, and because he's put a lot more guys in the NFL than you would think when you think Rutgers, he's able to retain players that way. And it's a dual thing in terms of boosters and such, because the Rutgers campus is on a bad day 40 minutes from New York City. There's a train stop on campus that takes you right into the heart of Manhattan. And so you have all those businesses and all those internship opportunities, but you also have the Jets, Giants, Yankees, Mets, Knicks, Rangers, Brooklyn. Let's go down the list, and down, an hour down the road, you have Philly with all their teams. So you're really in a pro area, and you're kind of the one college football team in this region. Penn State's 4 hours away from the Rutgers campus. That's the closest one besides that, or maybe Maryland, which is, you got to get through Philly, Baltimore before you get to Maryland. So with all that, there's a lot of dollars going to the pro market instead, but they have enough connections that they're able to do their thing. And, where it's going, everybody says it's going to rev share. And while the NIL will still be a factor, it may not be as big a factor as it is now.
So I asked this question of Jeremy with Illinois, and I'll ask it of you, because I think getting the familiarity with these programs is important. For Rutgers, for the majority of fans, when they walk out of a season and say that was a successful season, first, what does that look like for Rutgers? What is a successful season? And then 2, what's the potential for this program? Like, if everything's firing on all cylinders, what could this program look like?
All right, so David, it's 2 things. Like if I asked you what the success of UCLA is in Deshaun Foster's first season versus maybe his 4th, it's different, right? And so last year it was bowl eligibility. You got bowl eligibility, so it was a success. This year, that's the minimum. Get eligible for a bowl. Now, I always try to. I stay away from some of these things as much as I can, because this is all contingent on health, right? The quarterback goes down, you're in trouble. The backup quarterback goes down, now you're really in trouble. Now O'Shar Rashan's playing quarterback for you. You know what I mean? I mean, we watched it with UCLA.
There's guys who can't stress a secondary.
So great in Bruin ball. But sorry, I digress. But so when I sit here and I say, here's the expectation, understand that it's as we sit here today, but there's always things that change here. Mm-hmm. So I think get to a bowl game, maybe pull an upset somewhere along the way. The one thing is, you look at the schedule and you say, okay, here's the new ones. They play Washington, Oregon. It's Washington, USC, UCLA, right? Yeah. For Rutgers. Well, that seems pretty formidable, right? And then you realize until this year, when they were in the Big Ten, every year they played Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State.
Yep.
So, and just so we're clear, the last 2 years in the regular season, the only 2 games Penn State lost were to Michigan and Ohio State. So you went into the season thinking, man, I got 3 losses already. So, the Big Ten's a different program. I mean, a different conference, having seen the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and getting to see a lot of ACC stuff where I am here. I think one thing I'm interested with the Pac-12 schools is how they respond on the line of scrimmage, because I know with Jeremy, and I've talked to Jeremy, just him and I on the phone about it before, like even the middle tier or the lower tier schools in the Big Ten are physical, right? They're physical on the line of scrimmage. It's a very physical between the tackles league. And so if I'm Rutgers this year, can I sneak a win against a UCLA, a USC, which is perhaps the worst time slot in the history of Big Ten football for a team to play?
11 p.m. local times on a Friday.
Yeah. And nothing like that. Hey, all I know is this. I've made that trip to the Coliseum on a Saturday for like a 5 o'clock kick where, I lived in Encino or Northridge at the time, and you're leaving at like 9 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
A Friday night trying to get to the Coliseum, even if they stayed, what do they call it now by the Staples Center, LA Live?
Yeah.
Even if they stayed there, it's like a 7-hour commute. Probably.
You'd be better off walking.
Yes. So, I mean, but can they sneak? Yeah, I mean, I think if they get to like 7 wins in a regular season and have an upset, I think people will continue to see the program trending up. They're having a really good recruiting season. And so I think from that standpoint, what's the ceiling on it? I mean, it's a 12-team playoff now, right?
Yeah.
You're telling me that on a good year, they can't get to 10 wins or 9 wins and sneak into a playoff? Yeah, they could do that. That's realistic. I mean, I know that's what them and the 90% of the teams that haven't made the playoff before are selling to their recruits. I mean, I'm
not hearing that for UCLA, but maybe.
Hey, I'm just glad Deshaun's there and they're recruiting.
Do you know the last time they won a Rose Bowl? This is a digression. Do you know the last time they won a Rose Bowl? I was 2 months old.
Oh, man.
Look
you got
at
a lot of gray in that beard.
Look at
I remember you when you were a student, too.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I know, obviously, I follow both of those programs pretty closely just because of all the time I spent out there. And, I always, it's funny. One of the things I always, Ryan, hopefully you'll appreciate this, and sometimes I go on tangents, but I don't care. When I listen to how paranoid all these coaches can be about everything, we can't have this, we can't have that. And I remember Carl Durrell calling me up the morning of a game and being like, I can't believe we worked on a pitch out in the paper today. Now the other team's going to know it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and which I get, right? That's how paranoid they are. But my comeback is always 2 things. Especially when coaches won't let their quarterback talk like after a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I always say, well, how many more games would Pete Carroll have won if he didn't let whoever wanted to go to practice go to practice? And how many more Heismans would Matt Leinart have won if you couldn't interview him on a Thursday?
Yeah.
So it's like, we can talk about all this stuff, but I mean, I always enjoyed, like, Tim Teslon, I loved when with UCLA, even when I covered UCLA, because you always knew what you were getting with USC. And with UCLA, they always kept trying, but the heart was in the right place, and it just didn't work out.
It came out sideways. It always comes out sideways, UCLA.
Yeah, I mean, it's like well, look, SC had great time with Pete Carroll as the coach. Let's go hire Jim Mora. And it's like, I mean,
3 good years. 3 good years.
And it's so sorry, Ryan. I do
that's okay. That's really in line with our show. We get off the rails a lot, so I think that you can come in and stick with the theme, the general theme of the show. But we were talking about the schedule, and I wanted to talk about this probably last thing for me, but. When we were talking to Jeremy, Illinois was in the Big Ten West.
Right.
So for the people that aren't familiar, if you're a West Coast, that was the crappy one. That was the one where they're the bad teams. And then there was the Big Ten East where you're like screwed because that's where all the good teams are. Rutgers was in the Big Ten East. They went 3-6 in the conference, just like Illinois did, but actually made a bowl game and did a little bit better.
Right.
I don't know if anyone's benefiting more from this conference realignment, at least this year, than Rutgers. I could put that schedule up again, But when you're
Let me add
talking,
an intensifier.
Oh, yeah.
How many Rutgers alums work in the Big Ten scheduling office because they avoid Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State? In other words, the top 4 teams in the league this year.
Yeah, well, I think if they do work there, they just got hired. because let me help you out, folks. That September 7th is not Alabama. I mean, you saw that with Howard, Akron, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's the big game, non-conference. And then you see, I mean, I know we have here's the deal with it. Yeah, they went 3-6 last year in the league. I guess that's what they were, Ryan, if that's what you say. But I mean, again, they played Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Like, that's every year.
yeah,
And there were times where, they would go through those 3, and then like the next game would be Wisconsin. And so you look at Wisconsin, and I remember going to a game, and I'm sitting with my family, just a Saturday hanging out, and the Wisconsin O-line's on the field, and like their center is 6'6", 320, athletic and can move. And it's like, oh my goodness, I hope they don't hurt them. So, I mean, like I said, it's a physical league. It is unforgiving sometimes on the schedule when you looked at that East Division. And Maryland was in the same situation. It's not just that you play Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. It's that they physically pound you. And so you're going through not only the game, and it's a grind and all that other stuff, but not only are they really good, but they're stronger than you, they're quicker, they're faster, and it takes a physical toll on them. And I think when you go back and look at Rutgers, I think it was 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure it was, they had a really bad outing late in the season, and they were just physically beaten because of the Big Ten season. And that's why, I mentioned before with Tareem Powell, the linebacker, who, if he's healthy, he's their best defensive player. And their first 2 games are Howard, not the person, the school, Akron.
Just some guy named Howard.
Akron, and then a bye. And so, listen, one thing that Schiano does really well is schedule. And I know that at times Rutgers looked to get out of the Virginia Tech game, and Virginia Tech has looked to get out of the Virginia Tech game. And last year they played at Rutgers, and this year they play at Virginia Tech. And so I don't think either of those coaches want this game. Like, if you're Rutgers, why do you want to play a really hard non-conference game right now? Now, if you're Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan or Wisconsin or USC or UW or Oregon, where you're trying to, test your guys early on and make sure they maybe they see a team like this in the playoff later on, it makes sense. But if you're, I hope the UCLA folks don't get mad at me for this, but if you're UCLA or Rutgers, you're trying to build confidence. You're trying to learn a little bit about your roster a little bit more, and you're trying to get geared up. So if you have a slip up in the conference season, it doesn't impact your ability to play in a bowl in December. And, I think, you mentioned, Ryan, with all the travel and everything, listen, they'll be fine. There's nothing wrong. Rutgers will fly out there on a Thursday to play the Saturday game. They're 18 to 22 years old who get whatever they want on a plane, who have all the therapists and everything they want. You'll be fine. You're not sitting, I don't think UCLA, when they're coming to play Rutgers, is, on that Southwest flight that has to stop in Vegas and Nashville before coming to Rutgers.
UCLA charters now, Dohn. We charter.
Wow.
Is it the time where they used to charter for basketball but go up to like Seattle and had to stop in Reno to get gas because the plane wasn't big enough? Is it those? Is it a better charter than that? Or are we still
better charter? But there was an incident where the charter, the basketball charter a few years back, almost went down, and it got like the windshield broke on the thing. It was not good.
That's scary. That's scary.
Brian, we had a question in the chat from Tony.
Okay.
What's Rutgers' record against the Big Ten West teams the first 10 years? I pulled this up. I don't know if it's specifically, but I can kind of go through. Starting in 2014, Rutgers started was 3-5 of the Big Ten.
Right.
2015, 1-7. 2016, 0-9. Not so good.
Well, listen, Brian, when you talk about those, I mean, when you're talking, that would be like somebody asking you, "Hey, I know Paul Hackett stunk, but let's take this 10-year period, and the first 4 are going to be Paul Hackett's years."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, you know, if you have guys that are starting for you at Rutgers and they go in the portal and don't start at FCS programs, then I don't know what how do you measure that?
Yeah.
Like I said, like with Paul Hackett, how do you measure that? You know, did Pete take over for Paul? Was that the
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like, you know, Pete's first year, it's not like all of a sudden they were 12-0 and you know, getting ready to play Vince Young in the Rose Bowl, whatever it is. You know what I mean? I mean, like there's a progression there. And so if we're going to sit there and say, you know, I mean, by the time Rutgers got to the Big Ten, they had spent a year in the AAC with those natural rivalries like Tulsa and SMU. But, you know, it had fallen off so much that it's not even worth discussing. And then, you know, you talk about, you know, the 0-9 year or whatever it was. I mean,
they had 3 0-9 years, it looks like.
Yeah, but I mean, you go look at those. I mean, when Schiano won his first game back, they won at Michigan State. I think Michigan State turned it over like 6 or 7 times, and Rutgers won by a score. But if you go look at the years before he got there, I mean, they were being outscored in the conference like 350-50.
Yeah.
And David, that may be a conservative one. And so you're seeing like, you know, that's part of the old 73-0 Michigan game they lost to, where Michigan was just trying to run the ball, run power, and they kept scoring. So, I mean, anyway, I don't mean to I mean, I guess I did mean to interrupt the question.
You 100% did. Yes, that's okay.
There's context that just makes it, I mean, yeah, they probably sucked against them because, you know, they freaking were going to Kansas when Kansas stunk and losing by 40.
Yeah. Schiano's won more Big Ten games for Rutgers than they had previous total. So, yeah.
Yes, and it's not like he's going 8-2.
No, the most they've ever won 10 years, I think it's 10 years of the Big Ten, 3-6 is the best record. So last year, that was the best record that Rutgers ever had in conference.
I think maybe their first year they may have done, they beat Michigan their first year, which was kind of like the end of Brady Hoke.
Right.
Yeah.
Anybody from Michigan who tuned in to watch this is now just driven off the road or turned it off.
Yeah, he was 3-6 that year. But like you said, being in the Big Ten East, there's like 3 built-in losses. So that's why I think there's more optimism this year, is because you don't have and the best new team coming in, Oregon, Rutgers doesn't have to play.
Yeah. And I think, like, I'm really curious, you guys, to really see come at the end of the year what you guys thought of how USC and UCLA handled the physical aspect of the league. Because like I said, I'm not kidding. Like even Iowa. I mean, Iowa is physical.
Yeah.
And then you're going to play. I mean, look, I've been fortunate, man. I've been to a lot of places to watch games. And I think, when I think of the Pac-12 or the old Pac-12, I think UW, when they're rolling, is really tough. I've been at Arizona when they're playing well. Mm-hmm. And I think, David, you were probably at that game when UCLA lost.
Willie Tuitama, baby.
Yeah, but I mean, that place is tough just because your locker room's under the stadium and it's just on top of you. Oregon, a night game there is just really difficult. Iowa's pretty tough, man. And then you have Iowa, Wisconsin's hard to play at. And what happens in the Big Ten, guys, is sometimes people are like, woof, thank goodness we only have to play Minnesota this week or Michigan State this week. And those are tough physical teams. Like and I'm not saying every team is good. There's going to be some where you sit there and go, man, did they even know it was a 3:00 kick, or did they think it was 7 because they don't show up? But I think overall, it's got more depth than people think. It's just so top heavy that people are willing to overlook the others, a lot of the other teams. Like Maryland, I'll tell you this, guys. I went to a Maryland game last year. I could not believe the level of talent that they had in that program. It was amazing. Like, their skill guys were sensational. Now, if they need to find a quarterback that they can rely on this year, but I watched that Maryland game thinking, oof, they are close to making that leap. And it's, you think Maryland, but that's what the conference is. But you don't think of Maryland because every year they played Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brian, Dave, do you have anything else? Or we?
No, that was fantastic.
It was awesome. Hold on, let me give you some applause there. Yeah, Jeremy set the bar pretty high, but the donor, man, and the people are loving in the chat that you know the Pac-12 and the West Coast football too. So
let me just leave you with this. In life, there are certain markers: graduate high school, get married, have kids. Being on the podcast of champions, I can't imagine anything being better in life.
It's something else entirely.
Yeah, you're careering right now, Dohn.
Yeah, and Osar Rashan caught a stray. I was guessing that would happen, and it did.
So, someone brought that up in the chat, though. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Oh, that's outstanding.
No, but great stuff, Brian. We really appreciate you coming in and letting us know about Rutgers. It's it's like, as we're talking, it's like, oh, this is going to be kind of interesting. There's so many cool storylines and stuff going on right now. So.
Hey, yeah, and I'll say this too: for guys coming in or families coming in for either UCLA or USC game, just if you have questions, just reach out to David. Hit me on the board or something when it comes to that, planning for that stuff, because there's some particulars about whether you can get to New York City and how much time and everything. So there's probably going to be some questions, because I know when Rutgers and UCLA, they had agreed to play earlier and it got shut down. But if you have questions, just, when it gets to that time, just either David or Ryan will make sure that I can get you some info to help you out.
All right.
Beautiful resource, Brian Dohn.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you coming
Thanks,
on.
guys. Appreciate it.
And,
all right. See you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
We'll see you soon. All right. Good stuff. We love Brian.
We love the Dohnster.
He's great. A lot of comments.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Brian covered UCLA when I was a Daily Bruin reporter. So I've known Brian for better part of 20 years now.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, dude. Long time to spend with the Dohn. Long time to spend with Dohn.
We had let me fix your shot here a little bit. So yeah, we'll kind of finish things up a little. We had some comments in the chat I wanted to bring up. So if you're watching live on YouTube, thanks very much. There was a lot of comments for both Jeremy and Brian, and this was our first chance talking like in-depth Big Ten football, so it was kind of fun. We did have one of our favorite chatters, Connor, Oregon State fan. He says, can't listen to Rutgers talk when we were relegated. So be well, podcast of champions, and hashtag back the pack for life. So we're going to lose some of our, legacy members because, especially if you're Oregon State or Washington State, because it's really hard to hear Illinois. And because you could say we were better than Illinois, we were better than Rutgers, and why are we left behind? But that's the case. So we're sorry about that. But yeah, we appreciate it, Connor. Thanks for hopefully check us out again down the road, maybe. See something there. There was also some news, and Matthew brings it up. Jeff Tedford is going to retire. Yeah. He's got to step away again. So Matthew says only relevant to UCLA and Michigan fans, but Tedford has stepped down due to health concerns. Awful news. Hope it isn't too serious. He did that already once at Fresno in 2019.
He's done that 3 times.
Yeah. This is 3. Wait, 3?
He did it at Cal.
Oh, Cal. Yeah.
He did it Fresno State the first time around. This is actually 4th, because 3rd was last year, and then he came back for spring, and then he's leaving again. So obviously dealing with some serious health stuff, and has been for a very, very long time. So truly a great football coach, and it does change the complexion. I mean, if we're getting into the like actual ramifications on the field, it does change the complexion of both Michigan's game against them and UCLA's.
Yeah.
Because Jeff Tedford, for my money, is, whatever you want to say, pound for pound, even though it's a ridiculous phrase for guys who just stand on a sideline. But pound for pound, one of the best coaches in college football. So you lose him from the sideline, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah. We also had a comment, because this comes up from Johnny. I love how it's always, how will the former Pac-12 teams adjust to the Big Ten physical, slow Big Ten teams? How will the Big Ten teams adjust to the speed of the Pac-12 teams will bring? So there's that aspect.
Here's the part that I don't fully know, is that whether the speed versus the slow is like a real thing, or if it's more about, and this is where I've kind of landed, it's more about quarterback play. The Pac-12 has pretty consistently, up and down the league, had better quarterback play. I mean, if you heard Brian talk, you kind of understand it. Rutgers this year is picking up Minnesota's bad quarterback from last year, and he was bad. and Brian was talking about his 53% completion percentage as if that's good, because it is compared to what they did last year. Quarterback play in the Big Ten, especially in the bottom half of the league, is generally pretty bad. And I don't know if this is where I think it probably comes down to West Coast produces more quarterback talent than most other regions.
Yeah.
And the West Coast players generally went to the West Coast schools because all the quarterback camps, all that stuff, it's in Southern California. Big Ten doesn't have as much access to that, and so the quarterback play is generally worse. So I think when we're talking about fast or slow, what we generally mean is one's defensive oriented, one's offensive oriented. I think in college football, offense generally wins. That's what the statistics will tell you, as Kyle Whittingham will tell you. But offense is kind of the dominant force in college football. So when I'm thinking about these, and this is where I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards the Big Ten's going to have to adjust a little bit more to the offensive talent from the Pac-12 than vice versa. Because when I think about a UCLA even, and UCLA is probably in the, right there with Washington in kind of the worst shape going into this, because Washington lost a ton from last year's contender. Even those two teams, like the offensive firepower they're going to be able to bring against, just listing off some of the schools that are like very, very defensive but not offensive: Iowa, Illinois, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota. Those defenses are going to have to be elite because their offenses can't really score.
Yeah.
And so I'm really interested to see how this works out, but I generally will lean on offense. And I don't think it was simply that these teams were taking advantage of a bunch of bad Pac-12 offenses, bad Pac-12 defenses. I think it comes down to quarterback talent, and the Pac-12 generally had better quarterback talent. And the guys coming in, the guys who are going to be starting at quarterback for these four teams that are coming in, they're all former highly rated prospects. I mean, Ethan Garbers was a 4-star. He's probably, if you took the Big Ten from last year, he's probably like a top 5 quarterback in that league, because the bottom half was not good. So anyway, I guess long story short, it's going to be the story, and I think Dohn nailed it, which is how do the Pac-12 teams handle the physicality, which is code for beating you up on the defensive line. And how do the Big Ten teams adjust to Pac-12 offenses that can actually throw the ball?
Yeah, and I think the model, like how you could measure success in the Big Ten was different, having the division that you had one division that was just mostly bad. So you could plan to win games 17-9. Like you could do that. Like if we get a punt return touchdown and get a couple interceptions, we're going to win this game. And like you're not even thinking about like. I don't think you can do that anymore. Now that it's more open, you can't win that way.
Iowa's brand is going to have to change, I think. Like, it doesn't have to change wholly. They can still be defensive oriented, but they've got to have an offense. You in the old Pac-12, just for Big Ten listeners who aren't familiar, there's no team that ever looked like what 5 Big Ten teams looked like last year, which is a nearly elite lights out defense and absolutely no offense. Like that didn't exist in the Pac-12. Like the closest thing maybe was Utah a couple years, and even Utah was generally having, even in their worst years, a top 50 offense. There just nothing that looks even remotely like what's at the bottom of the Big Ten in terms of offensive rankings, where you'll just have this insane dichotomy where it's like, oh, it's almost like they're inhibiting their own offense to bolster their defense and special teams.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, no. We don't want to score. We just want to hold on to the ball for a little while so our great defense can get some rest. And I think that's like stated strategy from Kirk Ferentz in a lot of ways. And we'll get to that when we talk to Iowa. But I think that's going to have to change. And I could be way wrong. The analysis could be way wrong. But there's a lot of good quarterback play coming into the league.
There is. But it's weird, though. Like you would think Iowa, similar to Rutgers, has a pretty easy schedule. They have Iowa State, in Iowa City this year, but Illinois State and Troy. Their Big Ten games are at Minnesota. Okay, at Ohio State, there's a real one. Hosting Washington, probably not going to be as good. Going to Michigan State, Northwestern, hosting Wisconsin, at UCLA, at Maryland, and then Nebraska at home. Like, there's no Michigan, there's no Penn State, there's no Oregon. So, I mean, they could do a 9-3, 10-2 kind of thing again, just because it doesn't, you're going to have to win some.
Yeah, but the worm is going to turn. They're going to have schedules where they've got the juggernauts on it.
Yeah.
And when that happens, and that's going to happen with more frequency, because they're not protected by the division structure.
Yeah, I wanted one last thing for me. I'm going to pull this up because we do have to talk. Oops, let me. This is from Las Vegas. So you had the Big 12 had their media day. We heard from like Brett Yormark and stuff, and then Mountain West had their media days all in Las Vegas, and sort of sandwiched in between. And I don't know if you saw any of the reports about this, but the Pac-12 had like a night, like an open bar night, and you had the head coaches. And in this picture, you see Yogi Roth talking up there on the stage with the mascots for the Cougs and the Beavs. But it was a little sad, but it was kind of funny. I think they embraced it. If you saw some of the reports, I think Ross Dellinger said they had a scaled-down event. Commissioner Teresa Gould opens the event by gesturing to the bar. We are drinking tonight. If anyone has earned a right to drink, it's the Pac-12. So I thought that was kind of cool, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, David.
I mean, it's just sad to watch. But open bar's nice. We like open bar.
Open bar's cool.
Yeah. We would have appreciated open bar. It would have taken the edge off last Pac-12 media days.
It would have been.
We were struggling that morning. Hair of the dog would have been appreciated. At some level, I want the Big Ten media days to be in Vegas, but also I think like my body and general physical health does not. So it'll be interesting. We got some email questions to get to. You want to do that?
I got to log into the email too. One real quick. I did my first. Used to do a lot of hits on Pac-12 radio, Sirius XM radio. Like I would be on the show like almost weekly sometimes. Did my first Big Ten one this morning. So that was that's a little surreal.
That's magical.
Yeah. So it's feeling real now, David.
Yeah, it's all feeling real. All right. We got a lot of questions to get to, actually,
really?
in our Big Ten cast.
You have to send me the info for that again so I can log in and stuff.
All right. So our friend West Texas Mike, he provided some examples of like what he thinks we should do from a soundbite standpoint for each team.
Okay.
And he said just like little snippets of what it sounds like to sit next to your hated rival when they're at their drunkest and most rowdy or drunken and most depressed. So just like their cheers and stuff. So for like USC, it would just be, this is the only song we know. It's boring and it's slow. That thing. Okay. What's that one called?
Probably the Conquest one.
Yeah.
It's Tribute to Troy. That was Tribute to Troy.
Yeah, there you go. That stupid song. Jesus Christ.
That's fine.
Yeah, but anyway, so he has some ideas. John has another idea. He says, for the sounds of each team, just ask each mod team to submit their own. Less work for you, and this way their fans can only blame their own mods if unhappy. Problem here is then we're really offloading work to a lot of people who, look, we're doing this mainly as a labor of love, mainly. But then we're also offloading it to other people for whom the love might not be as strong. And so I think our efficacy might be low. That being said, I don't see any problem with just throwing them out there and seeing if people provide something.
They might have some ideas at least. And I think we're growing the love. I think, again, my theory is there really isn't like a Big Ten football podcast out there, right? Like, at least that we know of, or I don't know. There's some ones I might do some other show, whatever. But I think we will grow this a little bit, and then people are going, how bad are they? We're going to start our own. So I think we're going to start a whole new trend here again. But I think the love is starting to grow.
The bad podcast that launched 1,000 bad podcasts.
Yeah. I think we're getting the love out there, though.
All right, I'll read this long one, and then you can start picking things up if you're in the email.
I'm not in the email.
If you're not in it, then I'll just read them all.
Okay.
All right, this is from Oxnard Steve. 10 stars for the new and not yet improved Podcast of Champions. So I think this is doubling as a iTunes review. Hey, Ryan and David, congratulations on restarting the newish Podcast of Champions. The two of you will always be champions. Of what? I have no idea, but glad you are keeping up the so-so work. I know you like 5-star reviews, but I give this new version of the Podcast of Champions 10 stars. Yes, 10. Why 10? Because, well, let's see. 5 stars for the podcast, plus 2 stars for the 2 half-wit stars who host the show, plus 4 stars for the Pac-12 teams, making the big number conference far better than it was, minus 1 star to bring us back to 10, because the Big Ten has never been very good at math. And I do not want to hear any complaining from any of the pre-2024 members of the Big Ten Conference. The original 10, were there ever just 10, completely disrespected Penn State, then Nebraska, and some other institutions when the conference name and logo were not changed to reflect how many universities were actually making up the conference. And then those additional schools did not have the balls to demand changes. Blue blood torchbearer USC and their 3 closest allies, regional rivals, bring championship pedigree from the friggin' Ohio State Conference of Champions to a beleaguered conference that wants and needs champions. We also bring surf, sand, sunshine, and scholarly academia with us. Well, maybe not Oregon. And we bring Rose Bowl dominance with us. Well, maybe not UCLA, who cannot even sell out games when they give the tickets away for free. We also bring with us a tradition of having the most Olympic athletes, most Olympic medals, most Olympic gold medals. Oh, wait, that would just be USC. Sorry, Washington. Anywho, is that a Midwestern term or what? I just want to let listeners know that Ryan and David bring championship pedigree as well. So make sure to listen to every Podcast of Champions podcast wherever you find top-rated, run-of-the-mill podcasts. You'll wish you hadn't, but you'll be glad you did. Fight on, Oxnard Steve, bringing it from the Nard.
Nice. Love it. Big. I'll try to log into the email.
I'll just keep going. It's fine.
Do you want to text me what the password is or something?
No, I'm not doing this.
Okay.
All right. This is one from J and NY. This was about Larry Scott's Endgame. He said it was an original email, but it got lost in the shuffle when we moved over.
Oh.
So it's from J and NY. After learning that the Podcast of Champions in its current Pac-12E form was shutting down, I couldn't help think that this was Larry Scott's endgame plan all along. He was so angry about the Podcast of Champions intro, now in more homes than the Pac-12 network, that he decided, you know what? I'm going to sink that fucking podcast. And what was his plan to guarantee that intro and the pod go away forever? That's right. He decided to bury the entire conference rather than continue to let the pod live on. He laid his plan then to guarantee poor distribution of a flagging product simply to avoid the weekly embarrassment of his business ineptitude and the haunting Champagne Larry moniker. So how does it feel, guys? It wasn't the TV networks, the president's macroeconomy, West Coast apathy, or Georgie Boy. It was this podcast and its lampooning of Larry Scott's legacy that really set this all in motion. Ryan and Dave, Pac-12 killers. Cheers, boys, and thank you for the years of entertainment covering the Pac. But also, how could you have done this to us? Beautiful.
Love it. No, I love the conspiracy theories. I think it's.
I like that a lot. There's some spam.
Oh, we got
There's
spam.
some more spam. Okay, this is from Thomas. Thomas wrote a long one. Dagobahs of our lives. I like it. Hey guys, congratulations on your relaunch of the Podcast of Champions. I watched the inaugural episode on YouTube and thought you did very well. Afterwards, I noticed that it seemed like you were not getting much constructive feedback. So I figured since now was the time to write in and strike while the iron was hot, and while we wait to hear more on the whereabouts of both President Folt and Larry Scott. The lightning in a bottle you two caught inside this podcast caused by the Pac-12's institutional upheaval made it easier for listeners to overlook the original reason for doing the Podcast of Champions in the first place. When your conference only had a dozen schools, it made sense to make a show from scouting every school like they would eventually play USC and UCLA. The Big Ten now has 18 members, though, and I'm not sure you can get out of the POC version 2.0 what you will need to put in. My humble advice, it's okay to focus your coverage more on the Big Ten's Pac-12 refugees. The fan bases of your Nebraskas, Wisconsins, Ohio State, and Michigan already have their favorite Midwestern watering holes. Not many alums are still alive from when Long Beach was nicknamed Iowa by the Sea either. And oh yeah, having 18 teams means that for the Big Ten, Ryan, the center is almost certain not to hold. How am I so sure of this, you ask? Well, that's easy, guys. The Big Ten has no exit fee. Yes, you heard that right. The blue blood programs of Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Washington did not sign up to subsidize the budgets of small agricultural states or the high operating costs of poverty programs located in big cities. As a result, be ready for one of two potential scenarios to happen fairly soon. One, the top shelf universities depart the Big Ten to form a super league and finally leave Jonathan Smith in their dust. Two, the West Coast quads strike out on their own to form something new, but likely will sound really familiar. The good news for both of you, however, is that only one of those scenarios will actually work. A college football super league of only big-ticket draws would be the death of the sport, literally. Consolidating all the competitive teams into a single entity would undermine the legal basis used in the U.S. Supreme Court's antitrust ruling against the NCAA some 40 years ago. You see, even if the decision is overturned, there will be a domino effect that will put an Uber conference further and further out of reach. The POC and its intrepid listeners now find themselves, as the saying goes, in the wilderness. But since the podcast alludes far more often to Star Wars than the Bible, I'll put it a different way. The next couple of seasons for you both are going to be the equivalent of Luke's time on Dagobah. In a dark place we find ourselves, and a little more knowledge lights the way. Keep it lukewarm, fellas, and see you soon, Thomas. You know, I'm really happy that a basically opaque Thomas email was in our first real show covering teams, but like our second Big Ten show, we got needlessly complex, semi-opaque Thomas email. That was beautiful. No notes. What I'll say is it could have been succinct. You could have just said 18's a lot, cover 4, and then do a little bit more, which we're not going to do. But yeah. And then in the follow-up piece, you could have just said, there's no exit fee. Have you guys thought about this? Could this thing break up pretty quickly? And we'll say yes. That's 2 paragraphs. That could have been done.
Yes, that was workable.
Brevity.
We do need by episode like 4, we need a Zodiac Killer call.
Yeah. This is from Vipal, I think.
Sure.
I'm bad with names sometimes. All right. New show thoughts. Enjoyed your show, and banter should be a very welcome addition, especially considering the dearth of quality Big Ten pods. A couple of things after the first show. I'm a Michigan man, born and raised in Ann Arbor, and I didn't know what a, quote, hot dish is. I heard one of you likes chili. Make sure you get a true Coney dog when visiting Michigan. Can be found at any, quote, Coney Island, our version of Waffle House. Best is probably Lafayette and Detroit, but you'll find National Coney Island in Ann Arbor, and they're also legit. Also go to Blimpie Burger, Zingerman's Deli, and Buddy's for Detroit-style pizza. About the conference, most everyone hates Ohio State due to their fans, and Michigan due to the arrogance. No one hates on Northwestern because we do actually care about education, and what they do is impressive. Nebraska is paying for 97, Osborne begging to be included in the championship because he was leaving, crying on the podium, just embarrassing, and everyone hates them. Rutgers played in the first college football game. Minnesota used to win rings when they integrated early. Michigan fans are probably most excited to play USC because of the brand, but Washington feels more like a natural rival. Parentheses, UCLA would be perfect if they were actually good. I think that's it for now, but again, looking forward to hearing more in the future. Great. New listener.
Yeah, love it. Get some Big Ten perspective.
Love it.
Coney dogs. I'll go there. I'm going to be there week 3 or whatever. So, yeah, get some Coney dogs.
Do it. All right, this is from Mark in Vancouver, resubmitted from a couple months ago. Hello, champions. My sadness of realizing the Pac-12 is truly dead knows no bounds, but the silver lining is that you two are still producing a show. Wanted to ask this question again since it was submitted during your hiatus when you entered your cocoons as Pac-12 caterpillars, and now you have emerged as Big Ten butterflies. On the topic of the show Gilmore Girls, since us Washington State and Oregon State fans now can watch our teams on the CW in between Gilmore Girls reruns and The Flash, David had mentioned that he had watched some of the show. My questions are, which of Rory's 3 suitors did you prefer, or do you dislike all 3 of them? Thank you for continuing to share your beautiful mediocrity, and go Cougs. Mark in Vancouver. Great question, Mark. So I think I'm a Jess man, all in all. I think Jess
What the hell is this?
he had some complexity to him. I didn't find him particularly whiny. Some of the things he said were pretty clever. I think he fit her a little bit better. The rich guy, can't remember his name at the end. He sucked. That whole thing sucked. And his dad was a dick. And then Dean, I just found him very whiny. For like such a large, he's depicted as very large. I have no idea how large Jared Padalecki is in real life. He was just very whiny. Always whining. Stop whining, Dean. So yeah, I'm a Jess man. I think that would have been, I don't even know how the show ended because I didn't get that far. But I think that would have been the way to go for Rory.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had Gilmore Girls talk.
Yeah, at least I don't remember the last boyfriend's name. That's
good.
one.
But you remember like the actor that played one of the boyfriends. That's
dude.
terrible.
Dude, there's some dark recesses in my mind.
Holy shitballs. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's it for questions in our little email.
I do want to get watching some CW games. I want to see what that's like. Yeah, I'll get on the email. And is our voicemail line connected to the new email or still the old one?
Still the old one.
Okay, so we'll get that all cleaned up, and once Dave and I can both read emails, we'll read more of them. And we love the comments in the chat if you're watching live on YouTube and getting emails to talk about the off season. If you've listened to the show for a long time, appreciate it. If you're new, it might be an acquired taste. You might hate it. I don't know. We'll see. But we do end up talking about a lot of other stuff. Comparing your coaches to Disney princesses is sort of like it's sort of like one of our go-tos. So we'll have to figure that out in the new Big Ten. Is there enough Disney princesses? Is there 18 of them? Do we have enough for everyone?
We can come up with 18.
Okay. We can.
We got to learn more about these schools, though, because I don't want to, throw something at one of these schools that doesn't apply. We really got to dive deep. That's what these next 6 weeks are going to be all about.
Yeah. So that's what we've been doing. I mean, that's where we started today. It was great. Two coaches that, you're familiar with. They've been around college football a long time. There's going to be other places where it's not going to be as familiar, but we'll work through all that stuff. But thanks to Jeremy and to Brian for coming on. Make sure you get over all the different 247 sports sites and check out the content from across the Big Ten and, of course, all of college football. If you're out there playing the game, the new college football game, enjoy that. I was watching on Twitter early. People seem to be having a good time with it, complaining about not being able to play defense or whatever, beating their rivals. Angie Machado, her son's in the game. I guess he's like a walk-on or something at Oregon State. There's some fun stuff out there. So, but we've pretty much been on the air since it came out. So we'll have to get out and I'll check out.
Yeah, end this show.
We got to end the show. Oh, are you going to go play? Do you have?
Yeah,
do you have the game?
Yeah. I'm going to do the thing. We've talked about the thing I'm going to do, which is I'm going to play it for approximately 8 hours and then never pick it up again and never pick up the system again. And then when a PlayStation 6 comes out, I'll buy that too.
Nice. Okay. Well, I guess that's going to wrap things up. But thanks again, Jeremy, Brian. Thanks to everyone out there listening or watching. Hope you guys all enjoyed the show, and we will talk to you next time.
Bye.